Thank you for being here this afternoon. My name is Jim McGee. I'm Executive Director of Max Consulting in Gilbertsville, Kentucky. I'm going to talk to a bunch of commissioning providers and energy managers about building owner commissioning process. What I was inspired by to create this program was that we send, like the Executive Director of EMA, Al, when we had a board meeting, not this one, but the one before, Karen Shunk, our Executive Director, tells us that there's one consistency whenever they go to these different types of conventions and meet with owners, whether it's SAME, GCT, or BOMA, or whatever she goes to, and it's that building owners don't understand the commissioning process, okay? And it's our fault, because it's our jobs to communicate the commissioning process to all the members of the commissioning team, and the owner would be arguably the most important member of the commissioning team, since that's the person that you're trying to turn the building over to. Don't forget to log in on your app and get your CES credits, CEUs. This is the AIA program. My images are courtesy of Unsplash. And then there's a copyright statement. This is the outline. I'm going to talk about what is direct for owner commissioning. Well, what this is about is I've gone through the ACG Building Systems Commissioning Guideline and the ACG membership information, and I've culled out of that what it is that we as an association say about owners. And then I've also gone on ChatGPT and created a generic logo for a Building Owners Commissioning Association with a checkbox. And the question I have for us as an association is, if we're a direct for owner commissioning association, are we serving owners or are we serving only each other? And if you talk about a way to grow the association, to get the information that the owners need to understand the commissioning process, I think all that lies in here. Then we'll talk about the building system process very quickly, because that's not really what we're here to talk about, but I do want to avail everybody to the resources. Then we're going to talk roles and responsibility, which is the boring long list of stuff that we'll have to grudge through. Then I want to talk about three main subjects: OPR, operational readiness, and the commissioning process reports. And actually it's four, because I do want to say something about systems manual. And the objective of commissioning, make no mistake, is operations. And that's where we'll finish. So direct for owner commissioning. ACG promotes independent third-party direct for owner commissioning by providing members with industry certification, technical guidelines, education, training, advocacy, and opportunities. And I'm going to actually skip that slide. The independence, this is our values. I thought I had a mission slide, yeah. That is our mission right there, what I just read. ACG promotes third-party, direct for owner, building systems commissioning, yada, yada. And then we have three mission statements that the association abides by. All certified members are independent of general contractors, manufacturers, other entities. We do this ostensibly on behalf of the owner to avoid conflicts of interest. But I don't believe owners understand this completely, nor do I think they care. The second value is certification. ACG Certified Commissioning Authority, independent third-party type of certification. And again, I don't think owners really care about what certification people have if they feel they have the confidence to do the project. And then the last value I think was the most important, and I think we do a good job of this among each other, and that's the training and education part. And the real issue I have is, what are we doing in terms of training owners? In EMA, there's probably more training going on of owners, Al, than there is in ACG. But I feel like, you know, if we are a direct for owner commissioning association, then we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions about what we're doing to educate the owner, to get the owners incorporated into the process, and to work with the owners. Yes.
And they're already involved. When it's a piece of paper, they're not really, it's nothing tangible until it's actually built.
And that's what Al's saying. He's saying that when you got an existing building, that building's already there, and it's a lot easier to visualize and for people to get rallied behind, whereas a new building is a concept. I'll put another thing forward on that line, is that as, well, I forgot my chain of thought on that. We'll just move on. Senior moments, that'll be okay. It'll come back to me. This is out of the ACG guideline. The target audience is commissioning providers. And then look at the rest of everybody in the target audience and look around you. How many of them are here with us today? And what are we doing exactly for building owners, asset managers, property managers, facility managers, building engineers, and building design and construction industry? You know, we have to do more than tell people what to do, because telling people what to do doesn't work. This comes out of the 1.4 section of the guideline. AABC Commissioning Group advocates for owner engagement, and this again goes through the value. And then direct for owner means that the CXP's building system commissioning company has signed an agreement directly with the owner rather than the construction team. Do owners care about this? Some do, some don't. It depends on the savviness of the owner. And then the CXP is able to objectively apply consistent level of assurance that the owner's best interests are being served throughout the project. I will tell you that in order to do that, you need to not only understand your company's mission statement, but you need to understand your client's mission statement and understand what's important to your client. And the client may not care about a lot of deliverables, but they may care about particular ones that you better know about. And this is where communication and understanding your owners, developing relationship. So here's where I got the box A checkbox. Can we check the box? Certified membership status is available to qualifying companies that meet the following requirements. And certified members must have no affiliations with manufacturers, system components, general installing contractors, any person or company which would affect the ability to render an independent commissioning report. And who determines that? I mean, who determines? I mean, you determine your own conflicts of interest, right? But whether or not there's a value in independent third-party commissioning is the owner's determination. And all we do is write it down and expect the owners to adopt it, whereas there's probably a lot more needed in order to check that box A. They do get to the box A check on further statements, is that associate membership for building owners, property managers, product and service. Unlike certified members, associate members are not required to employ a CXA. Okay, and then although eligible employees may pursue the CXA, associate members must identify themselves and cannot claim or imply they're certified members. Now, to me, this is a little bit down-putting for the owner. Because first of all, most of us know in our clients that owners have personnel that are qualified to be certified. And if we want owners to adopt our commissioning process, why wouldn't we be in the business of certifying them on the commissioning process? Providing them with a professional avenue in order to express their management skills and an ability to operate the commissioning environment. I think a lot of owners have qualified people that could actually implement the commissioning process, but I also think when you get into large, complex jobs, having a certified owner on your commissioning team is the cat's meow, because now you're halfway there on communicating what the commissioning process actually is. And we'll see later on. The owner's in a bad spot on this too, and I'll explain this to you. Here's our close affiliations. And you'll see it's AABC, EMA, and ASHRAE, which is, as it should be. But there's a tab, independent tab, energy management, and ASHRAE. So you're looking at all engineers in that environment. There's a lot of owners in ASHRAE, don't get me wrong, because it's a stakeholder environment, but it's dominated by vendors and engineers. My question, if we can check that box, is where's our liaison activities with BOMA, with APA, with AGC? Again, I will say that EMA has done a better job in terms of getting out into the community and helping to educate it, but that again is more along the nature of the difference between retro commissioning, existing building commissioning, and new building commissioning, simply because the players that are involved, this gets me back to what I forgot, is in addition to what you said, Al, the players involved in the retro or the existing building commissioning are not limited to be unaffiliated with anybody. In fact, you need to hire a contractor to do the existing building commissioning process. And the owner needs to really be on board, because you wouldn't even have an existing building cost. So it's inherent that it's a little simpler to do that. But that doesn't mean it's not worth the effort on the new construction side, and maybe we can learn from it. But there's a lot of associations down there that we could do liaison with and improve this organization. Look, we can build our numbers and get our word out a lot better when we bring owners in and when we certify owners. Quickly through the building systems commissioning process, okay? I just want you guys to understand that we're based on ASHRAE and what our basic commissioning process is very quickly, because this isn't really the heart of the program. Ray left out the part that we are actually rolled out our part 2 of the guideline, and we've now conceptualized a 3-part guideline. Part 1 is completely done, which is the fundamental building systems commissioning process. Part 2 is what we're building out right now, applying the commissioning process to specific building systems. And we are seeking writers, so if any of you are interested in writing about any type, and I'll tell you, oddly enough, the least amount of material we have is on HVAC commissioning, which is hard to believe, but the electrical guys are kicking some major butt. Okay, and you can see that. Just go up on the website and pull up part 2 and see what's written. The NFPA 3, NFPA 4 articles, and a lot of that is incredible stuff. You guys really need to be aware of. One alternative approach to filling the CXP role on a project is suitably qualified employee of the owner's organization. And this is all I'm talking about. You know, let's find these people, let's seek them out, let's get them into a career path and get them certified. A lot of these guys will end up working for companies after they're done working with the owner as well. So it's a win-win all the way around. If the owner did not already prepare owner's project requirements or current facility requirements, then the third-party provider can support the owner by facilitating it. Let me ask you, all right, nobody look at their neighbor, all right? How many of you get an OPR in every project you do? Look at that, all right? I ought to tell you that the owner is not really keen on the whole OPR, and that may be simply because they don't understand it, or it may be that they have a deliverable or something they find more valuable. So what is it that we need to do as an association? Project success is more likely when the CXP is able to advocate for the owner from the project initiation through occupancy and operations, and that's another weakness. How many of us are hired in pre-design and get to carry the project all the way through to the end of warranty? Okay, and those are weaknesses, and this is an education issue. You know, I was talking to someone out on the exhibit floor, it was a commissioning provider, and he was really upset because he was working for a client who would pay $100,000 to a tab guy to go through the building and do a tab survey and tell him where all his airflows are high and low. And that's all well and good, but for $100,000, they could have gotten a complete retro commissioning report for it. You know, and that owner didn't see the value in the commissioning because he can't see what the commissioning is doing, right? He can see the tab guy and he can read the tab report, and he's not buried in all this documentation and process that he doesn't get. Go ahead, Tyrone. Yeah, that is what the contract specs are for. But how often are the contract specs written with the owner in mind for a particular job versus just taking a spec that somebody has and putting it in the project? Yeah. These are the basis of the ACG commissioning guideline. ASHRAE 202 and 22, ASHRAE published the existing building commissioning guideline, and these are the base documents for what we do with application in the ACG guideline. Out of the ACG overview, different frameworks for building systems challenge the building owners, inconsistent terminology, inconsistent capitalization, weird acronyms. One of the things that ACG decided to do was to try to help standardize the industry terminology and language by adopting ASHRAE instead of trying to reinvent our own process and try to, you know, buck heads. And I think it's worked very effectively. And this is one of the reasons why. This is the complete suite of documents that you're availed to through the ASHRAE, the stakeholders guide, the strategic guide, a whole list of definitions. There's also ASHRAE commissioning definitions, and there's a link for that online. I'll show it to you in a second. And then we have the standard 230. We also have operations for HVAC and R O&M documentation. And then we have design for VRF systems. And then we see from the bottom there, that's the traditional Guideline 0. Guidelines and standards, just a brief mention. You think of a standard and you think, well, this is the gold mark of the industry, but a standard is a minimum requirement, okay? There's a lot more good best practices to be found if you get involved with guidelines. And whether that's ASHRAE or whether that's ACG, guidelines have best practices in them. Standards are what a consensus group in the industry agreed was the minimum requirement. So when you're commissioning to a standard, you're commissioning to a minimum, and you want to really commission to a best practice. And a lot of this transfers over for me from the 1.6 Committee on Data Center Commissioning, which I'll get into slightly later. This is the standard. You can see where you can get to the definitions from that link right there. And what's interesting is the guidelines and the standards are only usually 10 or 20 pages, and then the rest of the documents are appendix. And since a lot of the guidelines have the same appendixes, those have been put into annexes and made available free, which you can get on the SSPC3, which is that link right there. And when you pull that up, this is what's available to you. Samples of commissioning plans, basis of design, commissioning specs, design review. This is all available free of charge from ASHRAE. And you can build commissioning plans based on these examples. And then finally, in the data center world, TC 9.9 is the technical committee. They've developed ASHRAE terminology link and a data center encyclopedia. And you can pay $24 a year and get a subscription to this. And it is an incredibly good resource for all kinds of detailed best practices in commissioning process. One of which I'll talk about in a minute briefly, levels and tagging, which is very important when you have a large number of assets. So the owner perspective on the process, a friend of mine, Brandon Martin, works for Army Corps of Engineers. Those of you who work with ASHRAE know Brandon. And I vetted my presentation with him because I'm not a building owner. And this is his quote. And it's a quote that I kind of nudged out of him. Owners see commissioning as a way to ensure they get what they need from complex systems on the project. Unless they're real savvy about commissioning and quality control, quality assurance, they're not going to care how the organizations have defined it, what organizations say the roles are, etc. You know, we have to do a good job of communicating if there's a lot of disinterest in what's going on there. And I think he's right. He cares about getting a system delivered and walking into operations. That's what he cares about. He doesn't care whether you're BCA or NEB or ASHRAE or AABC. What he cares about is, do I know you can get the job done? And when we communicate these process elements, we have to connect why doing these deliverables results in a better outcome. And I think that's where we're not getting a lot across. This is awful, but I'm going to go through it. This is everything I found in the guideline about the building process through the phases. So, you know, anybody want to dance or do something while I'm going through it? Yeah, Roger. Okay. Yes. I didn't intentionally leave them out, but it's just because I'm trying to scope it just for the owner. All I'm doing is looking at owners. Are working for the owner. Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't really addressed that, and I don't really intend to, but he's right. I mean, in a lot of cases, the designers are commissioning their projects, and ASHRAE is set up for that, right? If you read ASHRAE, the perspective of ASHRAE is the engineering firm commissioning their work. A lot of best practices mean you divide divisions and you break it up so that the design team and the commissioning team are different individuals. I don't want to get into that argument, Roger, but my point to you is if you're unable, listen, you're asking me a hypothetical based on the fact that the owner doesn't have the information he needs to make the right decision. So my answer to you is you have to have a relationship to your owner to where he places a value on the process that you're delivering to him. And it doesn't go anywhere until you get there. Okay. Yep. Right? I'm asking you to tell me how. That's how I'm planning to do it. I'm asking this association, what is it that we do for owners, and how is it that we can... I would like you to lead the committee, man. Let's get it done. No, sir. No, sir. No. The first one they're going to hire is the commissioning provider because you've done such a good job selling commissioning to the owner that they realize that you are going to be more important to them than the architect. Go ahead, Jonathan. What's an OPR, right? Mm-hmm. We already have that, you know. And I got slides on that coming up, Jonathan. And the same thing with the systems manual. You know, They're like, I get O&M manuals. Why don't you systems manuals? They're not the same thing, but they don't understand that, right? Go ahead, Tom, one more. Yes. Yes. Did you hear that, Roger? Yeah. It sounds good from Tom. But I agree with that. I agree. I totally agree. But what I'm trying to say to you is you've got to have communication with the architect on what the architect's responsibility is. You've got to do this in silos. You got to communicate the owner team, design. If you just dump the whole commissioning team and everybody has to listen through everybody else's roles and responsibility, it's ridiculous. You know, you need to cover the owner side of the process while you're in design with them and get them trained, get the right people assigned, and you have to train the construction team, you have to train the architect, you have to train the engineer all the way down the line. That's what I'm saying. And that's why I said no to you, because too many people don't communicate with the owner. You know, they'll communicate with the architect and the engineer, and they're like, well, that's the consultants. We don't have to have the owner's the most important part of this. The building owner often lacks time and likely expertise. I think that's a little misserving because a lot of owners do have expertise. It's probably more along the timeline that we get into it. And that's, again, why I think certifying owner personnel that are qualified would be a good way of communicating the commissioning process to owners. Building system conditions have to be articulated by the owner. So you have to have them incorporated, not just in the design process, but in creating that OPR CFR to make it all gel together. And someone must assume the responsibility of all this testing, confirming, documenting of this OPR for new and current facilities. And the OPR is a pretty heavy lift right off the bat. Further in the guideline, and here's again, do we check that box? The owner and the CXP should emphasize through their leadership, you know, that the team has unique roles and responsibilities. They are working to collaborate, and that's what I'm getting at. Each individual set needs to have their clear and understanding of what their process is. And here's where I think we miss the ball a lot, because I don't know a lot of commissioning firms that teach their employees collaborative methods. I spent a year in my company just teaching people how to do meetings. You know, a year of monthly meetings, you know, 12 meetings on just meetings, okay? And collaborative methods enters in this. What do you do when you have a hostile client? What do you do when you have a personality that's disruptive in all your meetings? And there are methods and behaviors and conversations that you can have, and teaching collaborative methods is the key to doing successful commissioning. The difference between a lot of good commissioning providers and a lot of mediocre ones is the good ones have an intuitive sense of collaborative methods, or they've gotten into learning them themselves. And this kind of, Roger, is where I'm getting at. We set ourselves up as the building owner and the commissioning provider on an island. I don't think this is really how it works. Roger would say, you got the design team over here and the commissioning guy over here, would you? You know, or the commissioning guy is the third line from the owner. He's not really part of the owner, right? Yeah. So this is an example of how we self-serve ourselves, right? We've created this web that nobody really buys into. And then on top of that, we have this whole bunch of information. How's the owner supposed to know? Commissioning provider group, commissioning team, commissioning provider team, project team, design team, construction team, and I left off the architect and engineer. But they belong there. But that is a lot for an owner to absorb. Yeah, here and there, yep. And it's confusing is what I'm trying to say. And then we have the roles of the process, which are pretty clearly defined through ASHRAE. And one thing to remember is projects are initiated by the owner. So your first contact on a project is going to typically be the owner, because that's who hires you. So don't you have a really good open line of communication early on with the owner to help develop your case for what the process is that you're selling to them. The owner and the commissioning provider have to establish an effective working relationship. That's the whole thing of what I've been trying to say. And the owner should be involved in all four phases. It's really interesting when I get through these boring slides, the first three phases have more deliverables by the owner than the occupancy and operations phase. And I think that's because by the time you get there, it should be ready to operate, so you shouldn't have a lot of things, but we'll see. So in project initiation, you can read this list a lot quicker than I can probably say it. But But they have to select the design team. Roger was saying that they hire the architect first, and then the architect has the consultants that come in with them. And somewhere along the line, they then hire the commissioning agent, right? So I think there's a poor communication going on that we don't get hired early enough. And that's something that I don't know that we as individual companies can address so much as align together in an association and say, we need to provide tools and assets to the owners so that they can take our process and help us help them to move forward. And I'm not going to just go through this whole list, but supporting an ongoing OPR document. I know that most of the people in the room don't engage in that. And yet that's a very clear part of the commissioning process. Assure owner stakeholder representation. That's a big one when you get into commissioning meetings and you need the right people to be in those meetings. And this, again, is something that is very seldom communicated in the commissioning plan. It's just verbally communicated. So there's ways of making these things happen. And then assure representation to prepare and execute the commissioning program. How many owners can do that without training? That line alone should motivate us to do building owner commissioning training. And it goes on, they have to advocate for the process, obviously, monitor deliverables. And I'm going to hit that monitor deliverables in a minute because I'm going to start talking about just a few of them and ask you, how is the owner supposed to manage all this stuff? Approve the project initiation phase commissioning plan is a big one. And one of the ways that I've used through the career and what's in the guideline is that you go for owner approval at the end of each phase for a commissioning report. At the end of design, they should get a commissioning report from you. At the end of construction, they should get a commissioning report from you. At the end of the occupancy, warranty, operations phase, they should get a commissioning report from you. Those are important. And then the owner also has to deal with the owner furnished materials and service providers, and we can help them a lot with this. Because when they third-party source material, then you have submittals you need to get, warranty information that needs to be collected, and you have to keep track of all the warranties on the equipment. Those are things that the owner really values right there. You can really give a lot of value to your client. And you see there's 3 whole pages in the project initiation for what the owner anticipates. How many owners, how many commissioning providers can spit out this list? You know, so that's what I'm getting at when I say we have to figure out a more streamlined methodology to communicate to our clients. And this really would apply to other members too of the team, but we're talking about owners today. So you get to the design phase, and now we're going to select the CXP, if not hired, during the commissioning. And that's really where a lot of us are at, right? We're getting hired in the later design phase or in the construction phase. And you know, that is a tough spot to be put in because you still have the deliverables that you have to deal with from the other phases because you can't continue your process. You have to write checklists, so you have to do submittal review, right? You can't just say, I'm starting here, now I'm just going to take the process from this point forward. You have to back up. So ostensibly, we should be making it more expensive for owners to hire us late. But we won't all agree to do that, and so that doesn't really hold, right? Just going through a few of them. Accept or reject proposed basis of design. Now, Roger, they got to have the architect and the engineer helping them consult on that. But I'm sure that when you commissioning buildings and you see a really awful basis of design or a BOD change that alters the OPR, then you speak out to the owner. You know, that's why you have that open communication with them, right? If you have a connection with the owner. Exactly, and that should be, what I want to do here is eliminate the if, you know, and that's where we need to come together to figure out that. Well, that's not an experience I have a lot, so, you know, if you're getting hired by the owner and you have a contract with the owner, you know, if you're working through the architect, then you're kind of restricted on that. Other design phase responsibilities, review and approve the commissioning specs. That's not something, you know, the owner has a lot of qualification at. He's going to accept, you know, his design team and commissioning provider's advice on all that. And then again, he has to get his owner reps there. They have to make sure they can be represented at off-season mode testing. Assure commissioning plan participation for the owner, and so forth. So that's what the design phase looks like. And then the construction phase, the owner has a lot. And I'm telling you that the real miss in commissioning a lot of times is failing to deal with O&M staff and appropriate project managers and occupants during the construction phase. Getting O&M walkthroughs, bringing the owner into the commissioning process in the construction phase when they're most interested in it, because as Al says, once stuff is being built, people can see it and they have more value for it. So that's something you want to bear in mind. They have to update and develop the OPR for design phase changes, right? They have to facilitate the owner and the construction team members, and not to mention the design team members. And again, you know, they have a long list, 3 pages worth. So 3 pages of construction activities, 3 pages of, you know, project initiation activities. You know, it gets to be a lot. It gets to be a real lot. And then this is the 3rd page. And administer the commissioning process is the last bullet on that list. Approve system manuals, operation and maintenance plan, catastrophic event plan. You know, the problem with that bullet is a lot of those deliverables are driven by things that are outside of the owner's actual purview, right? A lot of times we prepare preventative maintenance plans and things because it's a lead project. The owner really doesn't care about the deliverable. They just want to get the lead, okay? And as a commissioning provider, it's going to be helpful for you to understand what that deliverable needs to look like, whether it's going to be used or whether it's just a submittal for a lead certification. I think that makes a difference. Honest conversation. And there's a lot of things on this list like that. One of the big issues with owners is making sure you get that site access coordinated, not only for your personnel, but for other testing personnel. A lot of times we facilitate the test and balance guys when they come in, or if there's an energy management component and that kind of thing. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yep. So you want to know how this really applies to not private owners, but to government owners like Department of Defense and different owners like that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, ASHRAE's a big one. You know, a lot of us are members of ASHRAE for that very reason, to understand hospital protocols, you know. So you know, that's an owner association for hospitals, right? Usually not, but usually your commissioning process is going to play into that, right? You're not normally required to go for compliance. Like in a lead protocol, you just deal with the commissioning elements of that protocol and not the other parts. If you're going for joint commission or AG certification on hospitals, then it really comes down to the facility management and the construction management, but they will utilize commissioning to get their projects, you know, to the point where they can operate them. If there's been a renovation, then they'll make sure you do above ceiling inspections and things that could get them in trouble with the Joint Commission when they come in and do the inspections. And the other thing I'd say is that it's going to be easier to work with some of these government associations, as our experience in EMA has found. We're able to get training set up for different types of DOD, DOE, and different organizations because they have the funding to actually pay for the training for their personnel. Whereas when I'm going into a small university or a K through 12 school, I don't have the resources available that the government does. So in my view, this type of indoctrination with some effort is easier to do in a government sociology than in a more private enterprise type sociology. And then you get to the occupancy operations phase and look, it's just 1 page, which is really interesting. Assure stakeholders wrap, you just got to get them to the training, coordinate access, facilitate O&M staff stakeholders. Handover of the building is really your main objective of all this. So I guess, you know, the owner is usually most in contact with the commissioning team at this end phase of the process. But at the same time, he's had all these other deliverables up until now when you actually start to see a lot of the owner and the owner's rep. So we have to front load a little more communication. We have to front load training and figure out how to incorporate that into our owner schedules from a beginning point. And then it's just not owner responsibilities. The owner's operation and maintenance staff, we have in the guideline a section for them. They have to communicate operational performance expectations in project initiation, provide equipment identification and software file name protocol references, whether that's your BAS system, whether that's your inventory system for managing your assets, whether that's just a tagging system. All those things really benefit greatly, particularly what you name things and file names on programs and labels on equipment. How many jobs have you ever done that have 6 AHU1s or 52 AHU1s or whatever? Design phase, also the O&M staff, they need to share O&M information, provide lessons learned. You don't know what's failed for the owner until he tells you. And when you know that, that gives you a little bit of a cushion on working through design review, working through OPR, working through BOD changes and things like that. Provide lessons learned to particular building systems is a big one. And then in the construction phase, I like the O&M staff to come into the building and walk it with me. I don't know there's a better way. And it has to be at a good points. You want to do it at a rough-in, pretty substantial rough-in period where they can look and see where access is to things like valves and circuit junction boxes and all this kind of stuff. There's an invaluable component, but a lot of people are not pricing this into their projects because we're in a competitive environment, and then we end up lacking at the end because the O&M staff is not going to take ownership of stuff that they only see, with the commissioning provider for a very short period of time. But if you've been working with them in the construction phase before you get to occupancy, that training ends up being a lot more meaningful if it's possible. Sorry.
What who get involved in the commissioning meetings and all this stuff that you talk about are the operation maintenance.
I'm going to talk about that. Yep, I go.
Decision maker.
No, but he's exactly right. And it's two things. It's the project manager who's a lot of times not a stakeholder to make the final decision, or it's a project manager who has no connection whatsoever. He's in capital construction and he has no connection with the operation maintenance. It's your job as a commissioning provider to say, look, we can't do it this way. We have to have O&M personnel here. We have to have this and that. I mean, you have to make those communications. That's all I can say. Yeah. And again, what you need, Roger, you need a strong, robust association that advocates for training owners so that you have this fought one before you get there. We should start it. Yeah, I think so. I think we're getting around to this. Occupancy and operations, the O&M staff is now going to be on the BAS. They're going to monitor your system. And remember, you're operationally ready at this point in the project. So that's where you're at. And then in addition to the O&M staff now, how many of you do a lot of extensive training with the building owner or the end users of your facilities? That happens a lot more in energy management also because you're able to avail yourself direct access to the operators. In new building commissioning, it can be harder because they don't have one yet. That's right. It's really hard to do it when you don't have it. But there's certain key personnel, managers of departments, lab specialists, whatever it might be, that need to participate in project development, from the initiation of the project forward. And if you can get in the job at this point in time, that's how you start these relationships that Roger laments are so difficult, which I agree with you, Roger. I've faced everything you said, I've faced too. I mean, I agree with you. And then the project initiation phase, I need the end users and the occupants to recommend what items to put in the OPR. What's important to you? I'll give you an example like a nursing home where you have scalding issues, okay? A lot of times you just have a hot water plant and you have a mixing valve and then you send out to different zones. We've done a lot of redundancy in our mixing valves so that we can't scald people that are on different types of wards, people who are, under mental issues or just very weak. A person, it's hard to imagine turning on a hot shower and just scalding yourself, but that happens in nursing homes all the time. So when you're talking about a staff and they tell you that, which happened in a nursing home we did, the designer decided he put a mixing valve on each 4-bathroom plex, where every time you got to 4 bathrooms, you'd make sure you drop that water temperature down to 120. And then, that really was effective, and there was no scalding in those facilities over 30 years. Another thing is the building occupants in the construction phase, again, bring the staff in. This would be not so much during the rough-in period, and with the O&M staff, you would do rough-in period, you would do equipment arrival, equipment placement, you'd have a variety of them. With the end users, you're usually going to come in more towards a finished state of the project and let them have a view, and this can help you towards what you do in testing. Yeah, Al? Lead version 5.
And what she was talking about, because it was brought up by Wade, about that the OPR is not even required to be completed until the end
Of the project.
of DD.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Which in today's day, your 50% construction documents, at that point, there's really not much you can do.
No, at that point.
It has to be fixed.
Yes. And that's what Al's saying, that lead version 5 is not requiring you to produce the OPR until the end of the design development. A lot of you aren't getting them, period. So that's the even bigger overriding question. Clearly, there's an education problem. Clearly, we're not communicating, or we need to adjust because we're wrong. One or the other. You know, there's something going on here that we need to get to the bottom of. How are we going to do that without a lot of interaction with owners to figure it all out? He's saying that lead version 5 doesn't require the OPR until the end of design development, at which point you're producing bid documents and you can't really make a lot of objections. The whole point of the OPR, right, is to get the design right in the first place. So he's saying they got the cart before the horse, or behind the horse in this case. Yeah. How do you do that if you don't have an OPR? And I agree. And this is the section on OPR. It's such an undesirable or it's just people don't participate in this, and why? The OPR is supposed to be developed by the owner and the design team according to ASHRAE. As an alternate, you can look at the ASHRAE matrix. The OPR can be facilitated by the commissioning provider. And the ASHRAE matrix says the owner and the design team, or the owner and the commissioning team. ACG says that the owner and the design team need to create that OPR, with the OPR being facilitated by the commissioning provider. In other words, we can provide initial outlines that show them what's in it, and then we can work with them. There was a time when you'd do a workshop and you'd teach everybody, bring them all in-house, right? And you'd get the old erasable ink boards and, you know, go at it with whiteboards. But we can do this all now through hybrid meetings, through virtual meetings, and it's really a lot easier to get these OPRs accomplished. But again, we got to get the participants on it. Now you can see there, that's the list of things that the owner has to get in. And some of it is kind of in the design ring, like budget considerations and limitations. You know, that's stuff that's really in the BOD too. But this is clearly not an O&M manual. This is not your operation and maintenance manual. Yes, a lot of it's in the architectural program, and you can lift it there if you've done a proper design development, right? You know, if you come through and without an OPR, there's a good chance you don't have a BOD and other things that go along with that as well. And again, this is where education and communication are the linchpins. And operational readiness is an aside here I want to go into. I got 2 more subjects. I think I can do this in 5 minutes. Alex Cousinets and I did a webinar earlier this year about operational readiness, and this is in data center commissioning. In data center commissioning, you have much more critical timelines. You have a lot more money at stake. You're dealing with people's data, and once you occupy a data center, you're out. You're done. It's a cold walk away. And so as a result of that, in the data center industry now, we're dealing with levels of commissioning, levels of quality control. Okay, and each level has tags associated with like green, yellow, red for obvious reasons. And you can produce spreadsheets now when you do a lot of asset management, and you can say we're at level 1 with all this equipment, because you can look at level 1 and see all the green, but on level 2, you know, we're working it out. So what I'm getting at is, rather than get to the end of the process, data center commissioning is really creating a situation where we're going for operational readiness, and we're putting the onus on quality control by the installer to verify operational readiness prior to commissioning. And this is contractual with very severe penalties, which is things you can do in a data center or a mission critical environment. But the idea is, you've got quality control and you've got commissioning. Both of those have the same end game, you know, turning over operations to the owner. Okay, everybody needs a startup report. Why are we not sharing or cooperating on those things? Everybody needs certain deliverables. So what I'm getting at is quality control and commissioning need to, whether it's finding a common platform where the owner and the contractor and the commissioning provider and the designers are all on one platform, or whether there's a method of operation or a SOP, standard operating procedure, that requires certain documents to be disseminated as soon as possible. Getting startup reports on a project is very, very difficult. And it can be institutionalized by not paying people until they deliver them. Commissioning is not troubleshooting, right? Commissioning is supposed to be after the troubleshooting, and I know we don't live in that environment. But I think if we figure out how to shake hands between quality control and commissioning, we can streamline the owner's process, because here's the problem. The owner doesn't have to learn all this complicated stuff about commissioning alone. He's got to go through the same thing with the QC/QA program. He's got to go through the same thing with the administration of the construction manager, so forth and so on. So again, they need help in getting their hand around this. This comes out of the overview of the ACG guideline that different frameworks for building systems commissioning can also be a challenge for building owners. And that's why I say if we can get quality control, commissioning aligned a little better, we can get jobs done better. And that's being proven in the data center world, where tagging and levels is big time, and that transposes into digital platforms. And instead of using Excel spreadsheets now, you can just generate reports straight out of your software. In the ACG guideline, we talk about this term ready for testing. And what I think we need to do is shift and start using operational readiness in this spot right here. And I think it kind of aligns us more with the QC side. Ready for testing presupposes QC success, right? But we don't always get that, because we don't always state that either. And we show up when QC is not complete. But we need contractual ways when we write contracts, when we make agreements with owners, help owners put these agreements into their contracts with their contractors and their designers, and get QC on board. Help the owner to decide who needs to manage the platform. Is it going to be construction management? Is it going to be owner? Is it going to be the architect? And then get people on a platform that we can operate in. And then communications. How are we going to communicate? I mean, we can't always just drive out to the job site, but we can certainly text each other, we can virtual meeting each other, and so forth. And this is brief, but if I were an owner and I was looking at reviewing all these documents for every project I have, why am I hiring a commissioning agent, So I think some of them are very important, like I mentioned, each phase should have a commissioning report associated with it. But I don't know how we streamline it, but this is a thing where we could get owner input, because owners have to do submittal review too, and so does the contractor. They're actually submitting the submittals, and the designers are approving them. So how do we streamline these processes where the owner isn't required to do all this work for a process that he's paying, pretty good for, hopefully. And then that's the same thing with the systems manual here. This is the systems manual, and I think this is one of the least generally requested deliverables of the commissioning process, maybe even more so than the OPR, I don't know. How many of you deliver systems manuals on projects regularly? How many of you deliver system manuals on projects that aren't LEED or otherwise mandated? So it goes to about half at that point. So, I don't know whether to question the deliverable or question the training of how the owner fits into this deliverable, or whether this needs to be combined with the rest of the O&Ms, or how it is. But I feel like the systems manual is a lot more akin to an operations manual than it is to an archive of all the equipment like you see in the O&M manual. And it's more important, and particularly when you got digital systems, you got AI entering the picture, this is where you really need to show the owner what they want, because in my view, the system manual should be sitting right there at the building operator's front end, very accessible, routines on how to operate and all that there for the owner. Yeah. Yeah, and you don't, right? Just get the commissioning provider on Procore. That's my point. That is exactly, you helped me here, because a lot of times I have a construction software, I have a commissioning software, I have an owner database, and then the design firm has their own database, right? I'm dealing with 4 servers, and no wonder I can't get a startup report. And that doesn't even include the vendors. So yeah, that's exactly. And then that's what, are the elements supposed to be in the systems manual. I think we all realize that. But you can't check the box until you deliver something that the owner understands or that the owner wants. And how do we make that system manual relevant, I think, is a challenge that we face. Yeah, John? No, but they belong in there. This comes out of the guideline, that section right there. So when... Yeah, that's kind of odd, I agree. That doesn't need to be there. That's a bullet wrong. It should be final commissioning report. Yep, sorry about that. And we talked about that. And we talked about that also. The training information is another important thing. You know, you just think it's training information, but now you can DVD record your training, so when the owner has attrition, you should be able to pull up a categorized index and get the training to the right people that you need. That's all very easily done within our technical world now. I used to have to hire production teams, right, to do my training videos and stuff, and now you can practically do it with an iPhone. So, and then you can get in there and edit it and do whatever you want. Yes? And what Emily's talking about, I think a lot of us are experiencing in the training facilities that the owner is not allowed to record vendor training. I think Train is one of the companies that does that because they faced a lot of lawsuits because of that. I think you got to work that out up front, first of all. Like we've had kitchen vendors that had that policy, but when we restricted the use of the product to just inside the institution server, you know, inside their firewall, that it was okay. The other thing is you can accept the training and the commissioning provider can then recapitulate that training before the video and say, remember, you saw this in training from them, you saw that in training for them, and then I record it that way. They don't get the actual training recorded, but I have a consensus with the owner what they were trained on tape. So those are a couple suggestions. Do you have any, Emily, that you would suggest? Yep. Right. Would you grab the microphone? Give her the microphone. Because Emily is a building owner rep, so good to hear from her.
Yeah, so you don't get the value that you bought in the contract documents if you don't get the videos. Second thing is, as your staff turns over or does their annual, you know, retraining internally, you don't have that video available, so they just kind of miss out on that annual.
What are your thoughts in general on how ACG promotes the owner, serves the owner, trains the owner? What would you see? You're an institutional owner in a government setting.
Yeah.
What are your needs, I guess?
Well, I guess if I were a queen for this question, I would ask, how can organizations like ACG help owners with other industry participants, such as vendors or manufacturers, to get that training? And your idea about, you know, a testing that'll just be held and used internally,
Yeah.
I think is a great idea, for example.
Yeah. It's kind of like AI, right? If you put AI on the internet, then all your information is lost. But if you're behind a server,
Yep.
you know, it's a similar kind of thing.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. That's right, and that's a really good way to do it. And we do that with the owner, you know, when that's done. So yeah, exactly that. You can't get the vendor, but you can still provide a deliverable, right? And the big thing when you're dealing in that situation is to put that vendor to the test. Make him train every daggone thing you can think of before he leaves. You know. Yep. And then you don't have a recording of what they had or hadn't trained, and that's why I'm into the recap thing, you know. Yep, exactly. The goal is operations, people. At the end of the day, yep.
Jim, one other comment.
Yeah, Tom.
On some of the people that we work with, clients, we have the manufacturer provide. Some of them have segments on every piece of equipment.
Yeah.
That's training. So you just provide the module with that, and then supplement it with how it interacts with the other stuff as a means of making, you know, getting our people trained.
That's exactly good. And then on top of that, you have catalogs available to you for different types of equipment. Like when you do a VRF system with Daikin, go into Daikin's training library and take a look at it. I mean, there's a lot of sources, and all you're really doing at this point is giving links and providing access to readily available information that the owner wouldn't know otherwise. And I like that. I like that a lot. Yes. Yes, I know. Thank you. Operations is the last thing. This is our delivery goal. Alex Kozanets likes to say that operations is three things: assets, info, and people. It's really the activities necessary to operate and maintain and manage and administer infrastructure for all the different systems in the building. So when you are doing commissioning and you're in your final functional performance testing, you should be testing an operational ready system. If you're not testing an operational ready system, then this needs to be on the quality control. And, you know, writing lists is maybe not the answer. Maybe bringing the quality control people in to deliver their lists and to have everybody on one platform is a better answer. In other words, making people accountable. But at the end of the day, you know, we've really just got to get buildings to where they operate and they work. So I've got a couple minutes left if anybody else wants to comment. My idea is that we need to figure out whether we are a building owner commissioning association or whether we need to help create one, or whether our platform of bringing them into certifying them and training them would be adequate. But one way or another, I don't think we're making the mark when it comes to our most important clients, which is building owners. And that's an opinion that I want to throw out here for you all. And I'll tell you another thing. We've certified about as many tab guys as we're going to certify. We've plateaued out on certifying commissioning providers, but we've hardly certified any owners. So there's a lot of room for growth. Pascal.
I'm asking an unrelated question. I took my car to the auto mechanic and he did an inspection.
Closer, yeah.
When I took my car to an auto mechanic, he sent me a video of the inspection and showing all the things that was wrong.
Yeah.
So is anybody using like that with what we are doing?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And now you've got all these AI tools too, Bhaskar, right? Where you can come in and they can do trend analysis, all kinds of different things.
I want to know if anybody is using something like
Are you
that.
guys using anything like a diagnostic tool in your projects?
That they can send videos by text messages of whatever inspections you're doing and things like
How
that?
many of you are using the technology where you just take a picture of a nameplate and then you get all that information populated in a spreadsheet? A few of you, yeah. I've used it. Go ahead, Tom.
For government projects, who do you think should provide the certificate of readiness?
I don't think there should be a certificate of readiness. I think there should be a statement from the quality control and the contractor that this is operationally ready, and there should be severe penalties if it's not. That's what I think. And that happens in data center commissioning, which tells me it can happen in other places. So. I know. That you have no control over verifying. All you're doing is transferring the liability where they go, yeah, we're ready, and then you provide a certificate. And even if they've signed something, you're still the one who provided the certificate. In my view on that, it should always be the installer or whoever's responsible for that, is a quick answer. I got one more if anybody's got it. Listen, thank you all. I appreciate you all being here.